The rain had just started to fall, soft and steady, the kind that made the air smell fresh but turned the road slick. 13-year-old Jamal pulled his hoodie up over his head as he walked home from school, his sneakers splashing in shallow puddles along the cracked sidewalk. It was one of those afternoons where the world seemed quiet, the sound of raindrops filling the space where usual city noise would be. As he turned onto a less busy street, something caught his eye. A sleek, black sports car pulled over on the side of the road. Even from a distance, Jamal could tell something was wrong. The back tire had gone completely flat, and standing beside the car was a man in an expensive-looking suit, staring down at the problem like he was trying to will it to fix itself. Jamal hesitated for a second. He had places to be. His mom was expecting him home, and he still had homework to finish. But something in him told him to stop. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was just the way the man looked, frustrated, maybe even helpless. Jamal knew that feeling all too well. "Hey, sir, you need some help?" he asked, stepping closer. The man looked up, startled. He was tall, well-dressed, and had the kind of polished look that screamed wealth. But right now, he just looked stuck. The man glanced from Jamal to the ruined tire, then back again. "I appreciate the offer, kid, but I don't think there's much you can do. I called for roadside assistance, but they said it could take an hour." Jamal smiled a little. "I know how to change a tire." The man raised an eyebrow. "You do?" "Yes, sir. My uncle taught me last summer. If you got a spare, I can have it fixed in 10 minutes. For a moment, the man hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should trust a kid with his luxury car. But the rain was getting heavier, and standing here wasn't doing him any favors. With a sigh, he nodded toward the trunk. "All right, if you're..." "Sure, the spare's in there." Jamal got to work. It wasn't the first tire he'd changed, but it was definitely the nicest car he'd ever touched. He worked quickly, tightening the bolts just right, making sure everything was secure. The man watched in quiet surprise, occasionally glancing at his phone as if he still couldn't believe some random kid was doing this for him. When Jamal finally stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans, the man gave him an impressed nod. "That was fast." "Told you," Jamal grinned. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Listen, kid, I really appreciate this. Let me give you something for your trouble." Jamal shook his head. "Nah, I didn't do it for money, just glad I could help." The man studied him for a long moment, like he was seeing him in a different light. Then, instead of insisting, he extended his hand. "What's your name?" "Jamal." "Well, Jamal, you just saved me a whole lot of trouble today. My name's Mr. Carter." They shook hands, and with one last nod of appreciation, Mr. Carter got back into his car and drove off, disappearing down the rain-soaked road. Jamal didn't think much of it after that. Just another day, another good deed. He went home, ate dinner, and went to bed like normal. But the next morning, everything changed. Just as he was about to leave for school, a black SUV pulled up in front of his house. It wasn't a regular car from the neighborhood. It was big, polished, and expensive-looking, the kind of car that made people take a second look. Jamal's mom came to the door, frowning as the car's back door opened. And then, stepping out, in a crisp suit, was Mr. Carter. Jamal's stomach did a weird flip. What was he doing here? And then Mr. Carter smiled and said, "Jamal, we need to talk." Whatever was about to happen next, Jamal knew his life was never going to be the same. Jamal stood frozen in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes locked on the man now stepping out of the black SUV. Mr. Carter looked just as polished as the day before, except this time, he wasn't stranded on the side of the road. He had arrived with purpose. Jamal's mother, Ms. Williams, stood just behind him, her expression tight with suspicion. She didn't trust strangers showing up unannounced, especially not ones in expensive suits driving fancy cars. Life had taught her that unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice firm. Mr. Carter smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm sorry to show up like this, but I needed to see Jamal. It's important." Ms. Williams placed a protective hand on Jamal's shoulder. About what? Jamal shifted nervously. He still didn't understand why this man was here. All he did was change a flat tire. That shouldn't be a big deal. Mr. Carter hesitated, glancing around as if checking to make sure no one else was listening. Then he lowered his voice. I'd rather not discuss it out here. May I come in? Jamal could feel his mom tense beside him. She didn't like the idea of letting strangers into their home, especially not ones who showed up in black SUVs acting like they had secrets. But something about Mr. Carter's tone made her pause. He wasn't demanding or pushy. If anything, he seemed serious, maybe even a little nervous. After a long moment, she gave Jamal a questioning look. You know this man? Jamal nodded. Yeah, Mom. He had a flat tire yesterday and I helped him change it. Ms. Williams studied Mr. Carter again, as if searching for any sign of dishonesty. Then, with a small sigh, she stepped back. All right, but make it quick. My son has school. Mr. Carter nodded in gratitude and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the small but well-kept living room. The house was nothing fancy, but it was home. The furniture was a little worn, but the place was neat, filled with the warmth of a family making the best of what they had. Jamal dropped his backpack by the door and sat on the couch. His mother remained standing, arms crossed, watching Mr. Carter closely. So, she said, what's so important that you had to come all the way here? Mr. Carter exhaled and took a seat across from them. First, I just want to say thank you again, Jamal. What you did yesterday was kind, and you didn't ask for anything in return. That says a lot about the kind of person you are. Jamal shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. But it was, Mr. Carter insisted. He leaned forward slightly, his expression more serious now. You see, most people would have walked right past me. They would have assumed I had it all figured out because of how I look, what I drive. But you stopped. You helped. That tells me you're someone special. Jamal shifted in his seat, not sure how to respond. It felt weird hearing this from a man like him. Someone who probably had everything he could ever want. Ms. Williams cleared her throat. If this is just about thanking my son, you could have done that without showing up at our house. What's really going on? Mr. Carter hesitated again. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee, like he was deciding how much to say. I run a company, he finally said. A pretty successful one. And I didn't get here without help. Someone gave me a chance once when I was younger, and it changed my life. I've been looking for a way to pay that forward, to find someone deserving and give them an opportunity they might not otherwise get. Jamal's eyebrows lifted slightly. What kind of opportunity? Mr. Carter smiled, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. That's what I'd like to talk to you about, but it's not something I can explain in 5 minutes. If you're willing, I'd like you to come with me. Just for a few hours. I want to show you something. Jamal's mom immediately stiffened. Go with you where? My office, Mr. Carter said. I want Jamal to see what I do, meet some people, and hear me out. I promise I'll have him back before dinner. Ms. Williams let out a dry laugh. You think I'm about to let my son climb into a car with a stranger? No offense, but I don't know you, and I don't let my child go off with people I don't know. Mr. Carter nodded, like he expected that answer. I completely understand. And I wouldn't trust me either if I were in your shoes. So how about this? I'll give you my business card, my office address, and my personal phone number. You can look me up, call me, do whatever you need to feel comfortable. If after that you decide you're okay with it, you can bring Jamal yourself. Ms. Williams studied him carefully. Jamal could tell she was torn. He wasn't sure what to think either. It all seemed so random. Why would a rich businessman go out of his way to help some kid he met on the street? But at the same time, there was something about Mr. Carter that didn't feel fake. Finally, his mom sighed and took the card from his hand. I'll think about it, Mr. Carter smiled. That's all I ask. He turned to Jamal. I hope I see you soon. Then, just like that, he stood up and walked to the door. As he stepped outside, the black SUV was still idling at the curb, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Mr. Carter got in and within seconds, the car disappeared down the street. Jamal and his mother stood in silence for a moment. "What do you think?" he finally asked. Ms. Williams stared at the business card in her hand, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I think rich people don't just show up out of nowhere unless they want something." Jamal frowned. But he didn't ask for anything. Not yet. Jamal knew his mother was protective for a reason. Life hadn't been easy for them. His father had left when he was a baby, and his mom had worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. She had learned the hard way that good things didn't come for free,